Thanks a lot for taking this call and offering your time to go through your FE exam preparation journey with me. So, I'd like to start out with the very first question, which is when did you pass your FE exam?
October 2020.
2020, right? Yeah, last
Yeah,
year.
last year.
Yeah, October 2020. So, you passed it after the July 2020 changes.
Correct. So it
Yeah.
was the CBT exam.
Yeah, the CBT exam, but I think in July 2020, they sort of it's a CBT 2.0 type, you can call it, because they made changes to specification, relatively significant. And yeah, it was in July 2020, I published my third edition of the study guide as well. So, how many years were you out of school when you took the exam? That was last year, right? When did
Yeah,
you graduate?
it was about 5 or 6.
Okay, right. And you've been working in power systems industry,
Yeah, MEP firm doing electrical design. Yeah.
right? And what was your motivation for taking the FE exam?
Well, it's the first step on the way to getting a PE, so that was the
Right,
motivation.
right. And I think in your line of business and within the industry, you can recognize the value of PE license right away and how it's going to
Absolutely.
help your career, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to jump to a question essentially, like after taking the exam, it directly or indirectly impacted your career.
Well, it lets everyone at the company know that, I'm serious about becoming a PE. And as such, that reflects the way they look at me and the opportunities that they give me to grow within the company.
Right. Yeah, and that's probably one of the biggest advantages, at least at the FE level, because it signals to your current employers, your prospective employers, right, within the industry. It raises your profile as well, lets everyone know that, okay, he's cleared the FE exam and you're on your way basically towards a PE licensure. It's no longer a guessing game, especially once you've done your FE. I think the probability of you basically moving ahead and getting the PE done is very high because it's only, as you said, it's only one step. Resources did you use for your FE exam prep?
My main resources were the PE study guide and the FE study guide and your video courses as well.
So you mean the study guide for FE electrical? You used the second edition or the third edition?
I used both the second and third edition
Okay. And you also use my on-demand course,
and the on-demand video course. Yep,
right? When did you read your exam preparation? So you took the exam in October and passed it in the
yep,
first attempt, correct?
correct.
Yeah.
So I mainly started, I'd say, April of 2020.
Okay. So that's about 6 months, right?
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So April, and how many hours were you putting in on average?
Uh, Probably 15 hours a week, somewhere around there.
Okay, consistently for 6 months, give or
Yeah,
take. Yeah,
and a
that's
little extra at the end.
right. That always happens. Yeah, but that is quite standard. And in fact, depending on how many years you are out of school, how recent you are with academics, 15 to 20 hours is the average. Unless you're a new graduate, a recent graduate, or even a final year student, um, you can probably get away with like 10 hours of studying for maybe even 4 months or less. But if you are learning and maybe even relearning a few things, then that's pretty standard. So, how did you manage your time with full?
Basically, I just tried to chip away at it, a few hours a day if possible, a little more on the weekend, and just tried to keep it consistent.
Right? So, forming some sort of a habit on a weekly basis, on a daily basis.
Yeah, to the extent possible daily. I usually did about 5 days a week, less on the during the week, but more on the weekend, but just a
Right?
consistent effort.
Right. That habit portion, I think, at least for someone like me, it's really important. If I can get something in my routine, then it's almost on an autopilot mode. You don't even think about it, right? But the more you have to think about decision making, the more difficult it gets,
Yeah.
because it sort of drains your energy. Um, I know I've read about it that some of the very successful people, what they do, and would have noticed as well, there's some really successful people who just happen to be having one set of clothes all the time, happen to be wearing one set of clothes. And one of the reasons I read is because they don't want to spend their energy or focus or in every day making a choice about what they want to wear, right? So stick with a particular color of socks, stick with a particular color of shirt, and then focus your energy and attention on things that are much more important.
Yeah, focus. That's definitely the key.
Exactly. Um, and how did you sustain that level of effort? Like, do you have any tips or?
Yeah, well, so one of the things I did was I took care of things before that so that I didn't have other little projects going on in my life that would, kind of disrupt that flow. So
Right.
before I got into it, I tried to clear out my schedule for the next several months so that I could accomplish this.
That's great. Yeah, and having a very very realistic expectation of your time or of what you can do within given amount of time is very important as well. So if you, as you said, like if you can focus on a particular task and maybe zone out at least for temporary basis, right? You can potentially put things on hold. um, that will almost guarantee that you don't have to retake the exam, because that is not an ideal scenario,
Yeah.
right? In terms of resources, if we go through the two resources that you used, let's start with the online course, because a lot of students probably don't even know about the online course. The books are well known on Amazon. But with the online course, what did you like about it and how it helped you?
Well, it's a great primer I've found to the books. So for me, being out of school for a while, it took you through the basics of the concept. It reintroduced you to it, and then gave you some examples that you could work through with the video, and then a quiz at the end. And by the time you were done that, usually you were ready to jump into the problems on the guide.
Okay, so you used the course essentially to review the concepts, make use of the quiz within the course in order to um, get develop some proficiency with problem solving, and then use the study guide in conjunction with it in order to basically get extra practice,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Get extra practice, and some of the problems are, they're more diverse and a little more challenging in the
Right.
study guide.
Part of your exam preparation, were there certain sections, certain concepts that you had a decent idea about that they were going to bug you, you were going to find them challenging, and if so, like how did you tackle them through these resources?
Yeah, I mean, like everyone, there's areas of strength and areas of weakness.
For sure.
So what I did was I went through the whole program twice with the videos and the study guide, and I tried to identify, where I was strong and where I was weak. And instead of focusing on bringing all my weaknesses up, I excluded one or two things where I accepted that that was not realistic.
Too much
And
of
I said,
work to
well,
get it.
what can I
Yeah.
do here to try to get, looking for partial points,
Right.
accept that. And then areas where I was in the middle,
Yeah.
that's where I actually focused most. So to bring the middle up
Right.
to a good understanding, and where I already understood well, that was easy, of course. But it was actually a time management to not put too much time on things that were going to be of limited return to me, where I wasn't going to use them professionally, and it was unlikely I was really going to learn it well for the test either.
Right. Yeah, that's a pretty methodical approach. And the first round of review, I think, helped you, as you pointed out, identify those areas of weaknesses. Because I guess if you're 5 years out of school and just looking at at the exam specifications, 17 topics, well, it was 18 when you started, and then got reduced to 17. But in all practicality, um, it still covers a lot of stuff. Really, your entire 4 year undergraduate engineering. But just by looking at a specification, I don't think that anyone can have a very realistic idea about their strengths and weaknesses. Maybe you can say, okay, if you're not good with programming, most of the power systems engineers really don't spend too much time programming, if at all, right? Then you could, okay, upfront say, okay, software is something I might have to spend a little bit of extra time. But it's only when you go through the entire specification or use an effective preparation resource, then you realize, okay, this transient RC RL circuit, the way the switching is done, the way that you calculate the initial voltages or the initial current, I'm not able to wrap my head around it. Or differential equations, for instance, or Bayes theorem. Those are some of the more challenging concepts. But I think that first round of review, you methodically made note of those concepts, and in your second round of review, you're saying that your game plan was to bring the topics that were in the middle up to a higher level of competency rather than trying and spending extra bit of time to basically convert all the weaknesses, all of the Achilles heels into your strengths.
Yep.
Yeah, that's very smart. Having said that, some students I know, even if they are 90% comfortable with 90% of the content, if they know that there are certain topics that they are weak on, I think that um, it's difficult for some students to go go in with full confidence, right? I personally make that judgment call, like when I was taking FE exam, PE exam, or exams during my undergraduate or graduate studies. How do you tell yourself, okay, it's okay to basically for this small portion to let go, even if it shows up, even if you skip it, it's fine. I mean, I'm not recommending students to skip anything, but it's almost impossible for someone not to have any weaknesses. So how do you cope with those weaknesses going into the exam?
Absolutely. So while I accepted that there were areas I wasn't strong in, I did still study them with the intent that maybe if it was a really easy question, I could
Right.
get it right. Or
Yes.
maybe if it was a more difficult question, I could at least rule out one of the options to increase my
Right.
percentage.
Yeah.
So taking that approach, I said, you know what, I'm not great here, but I can improve the percentage. So I'm not going to get these all wrong. I'll only get most of them wrong.
Right.
But if I'm
Yeah.
strong enough elsewhere, it's okay.
Exactly. Exactly. And what's your take on during the exam?
My take was to practice, take the practice exams earlier so that you were very familiar with the concepts. Nothing was surprising to you, and to generally keep it moving. Um,
Right.
where I encountered one of those areas of, we'll say, extreme difficulty for me, if I knew I couldn't get, if it was unlikely I was going to get the answer correct,
Yeah.
I would spend usually not more than a minute on that question
Right.
because it was a poor return
Exactly.
on a very time intensive situation.
Right.
So I'll do my best in a minute and just move on.
Yes. And maybe if you have practiced enough, maybe under 30 seconds just by reading a question, you can tell yourself that, it's out of my league, right?
Yep. And that was
Because
it. I didn't want to
yeah,
waste time on things that, you on the FE, you have so little time.
yes.
So if it's, don't invest a lot of time on something you're unlikely to get right.
Right. Because if you think about it from a different angle, if it's a tough question, you're not going to be able to solve it, even if you give yourself 5 minutes, right? And if you are able to flag it or, completely rule it out. So if you've spent just 30 seconds on that question, that basically means that you've given yourself an additional 2 minutes for other questions, right? On which
Yep.
you can have a much higher probability of scoring, right? And the worst case scenario is that you end up spending the entire 5 minutes and still not get the answer, because at that point I think it becomes an ego issue and you really want to solve it, but now you are really, that question is not only hurting your point for that particular problem, it's hurting your overall exam now.
Yeah, and that's part of it too. Where you referenced confidence earlier. It, if if you're really on this difficult problem, the quicker you move past it, the less impact it, for me at least, it had
Yeah.
on my confidence. You move past it, you left it behind you, you didn't focus and dwell on this what appears to be impossible problem, and instead you
Right.
moved on to the next one, and hopefully you're just sailing through that and feeling good.
Right. No, that's a very good advice. Um, in terms of your, what at least initially, what was your take on the FE exam? Did you feel like, um, if you know the reference handbook, all the equations, that would be comfortable, or you wanted to go in a little bit deeper, make sure that you are prepared for all scenarios? Like how, like there is an entire spectrum of how much time you can spend, how much effort you can spend. Some students take an approach that it's just going to be plug and play. Other students really go thought over prepare for it, right? um, how did you evaluate that?
I let you do that. I followed the study guide and the online class, and it worked out fine.
Right. Yeah, because it's a balancing act with time, with time, with somebody who's working full time, right? With time constraints, it's very challenging to. You're literally going through entire 4 years of undergraduate engineering, right? With minus some of the electives, minus maybe some of the advanced courses that you might end up taking in your undergraduate engineering. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think that's part of the key. Like, you probably already know where your strengths and weaknesses are,
right,
and if you didn't get it when you were in, going through your undergraduate,
right,
the chances of just all of a sudden figuring it out, it's a little unlikely unless you really study. But the breadth of topics is so colossal, in my opinion,
yes,
that it's not worth you becoming an expert in something if you're not good at it,
right,
because there are so many other topics.
right. Right. So there are two takeaways from what you just said, right? That while going through your undergraduate, if there were some areas, some topics that you didn't feel comfortable with, right, then all of a sudden preparing for the FE exam will not make you expert at it, right? So that is completely unrealistic expectation. Um, Having said that, uh, sometimes I realize that a lot of my students who are actually working full time or are seasoned professionals, one of the things that I notice in a lot of those students is that they're very disciplined with their time, right? And maybe it comes with experience, maybe it comes with realization that there are additional demands on your time. So they 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 are more disciplined towards making better use of their time. So with, let's say, electronics, okay, you might have taken electronics 1, electronics 2, and it would have been a lot more detailed. But for the FE exam, uh, the range of topics is very broad. But if you can zone in the fundamentals and gain good understanding of the fundamentals, um, I would say that, um, if you're disciplined and if you're consistent, then you can potentially, at a very minimum, do some damage control in those areas, right? So rather than completely writing them off, there is still, and you never know, maybe on an easy topic you might get a difficult question, and on a difficult topic you might get an easy question,
Yep,
right? So your approach towards not leaving anything completely out, and at least going through the lectures, going through the problem sets and the study guide, so that if something easy comes from a difficult topic, you're able to still field it, right? And
absolutely.
yeah, and the breadth of the topic, that is the biggest challenge for the FE. I 100% agree with that. How did you, another common challenge is that you start from math, go through probability, engineering economics, ethics, properties. By the time you reach software engineering, a lot of students complain that, okay, why does it seem like I'm forgetting math? Why does it seem like I'm forgetting probability? So you mentioned you did 2 rounds of review, but was there anything else that you did in order to address that?
Yeah, so like you said, the 2 rounds of review is really helpful. But even at that, like, it takes so long to get through the program. But at the end, if you do the practice exams, then it forces you to go back and recall the most important points that you may have forgot.
Right.
So that's what really I think did it. 2 rounds of review and then practice problems or practice tests.
Right. Exams did you take?
Well, the NCEES one, of course, and then a couple of other ones as well.
Right. And d- in terms of the practice exams, how early before the actual exam you took the practice exams?
So one the weekend prior, and then another one the weekend before that. So that I
Okay.
would do it on the weekend, and then I'd give myself the week to go through all the questions.
Okay.
So it was really kind of like that final, I'm done going through everything. Now I just need to, like, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? What did I forget? And what did I forget that was in the handbook that you have available?
Right. Yeah. No, that's smart. I tell students that don't look at these practice exams as a crystal ball that's going to tell you whether you're going to pass or fail. Because these practice exams, yeah, I mean, it tells you how ready you are for the actual exam, but they are the best utilization, at least in my opinion, is to find those last minute areas of concern, and then you can fine tune it. Okay. Definitely for the NCS sample exam, make sure you understand each and every problem inside out, so that you can go into the exam knowing that at least all the practice exams you've taken care of, right?
Yep.
And one last exams did you take?
Well, the NCEES one, of course, and then a couple of other ones as well.
Right. And d- in terms of the practice exams, how early before the actual exam you took the practice exams?
So one the weekend prior, and then another one the weekend before that. So that I
Okay.
would do it on the weekend, and then I'd give myself the week to go through all the questions.
Okay.
So it was really kind of like that final, I'm done going through everything. Now I just need to, like, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? What did I forget? And what did I forget that was in the handbook that you have available?
Right. Yeah. No, that's smart. I tell students that don't look at these practice exams as a crystal ball that's going to tell you whether you're going to pass or fail. Because these practice exams, yeah, I mean, it tells you how ready you are for the actual exam, but they are the best utilization, at least in my opinion, is to find those last minute areas of concern, and then you can fine tune it. Okay. Definitely for the NCS sample exam, make sure you understand each and every problem inside out, so that you can go into the exam knowing that at least all the practice exams you've taken care of, right?
Yep.
And